Hi again. So this afternoon we are going to start making a pot. So as I mentioned in one of the previous videos, if you have a clay pot that is round like this, maybe a bisque piece that doesn't have glaze on it, or is made out of plaster, and you can make your own mold by pouring plaster over something like a balloon or something like that. Your pot can go directly into the pookie. If it does not, if it's shiny and smooth, like this pot is, it has a glaze on the inside. So I'm going to prepare it by spraying a little bit of oil, not much. Take a little paper towel and just cover it. You don't want it to be oozing with oil. You just want it to be enough so that it will hold the mica onto the surface of the pot. So I'm going to take my mica, pour it in there. Doesn't matter how much. And then I'm going to go around as if you were flouring and oiling a baking pan to bake a cake. So when the whole surface is covered, I'm going to dump the rest of it back in my little baggie. So now my pot is prepared and ready to put a piece of clay in. So I'm going to take my mica clay. If you have a wire, you can use fishing wire and put it on 2 buttons or something, and that will make it easy for you to cut the clay so you don't have to get it under your fingernails. So I'm making a tiny pot, so I'm not using a whole lot of clay. I'm going to squeeze it and get it into a nice flat circle. So now I'm going to take my rolling pin. A rolling pin can be a regular rolling pin. It can be a dowel. This is probably a 1-inch dowel, maybe 1.5 inches. You can use a piece of PVC pipe that's about that big around. Anything that works as a rolling pin will be fine. The thing that you have to watch out for is divots and dents that are in the rolling pin, because they will transfer to your piece of clay. So I'm finding a piece on this rolling pin that is smooth, and I'm rolling. Now when I roll, I hold my rolling pin and I roll back and forth, and I don't go over the edge. If I go over the edge, then I make the edge really, really thin, and I want this to be evenly thick all the way through. So I pick it up and I move it. I turn it over so that I get it smooth on both sides. Got a little piece of cloth in there. Okay, so the thickness, everybody always asks about the thickness, and the thickness really is relative to the size of your pot. So if you're doing a tiny pot like this, you want it to be fairly thin. If you're doing a great big pot, you want it to be really thick. So use your judgment. So I'm going to lay this on top. Now, if I push with my fingers in the middle, I'm going to go right through the clay. So I'm just going to place my fingers there and not push, but I'm going to lift up the sides and kind of lift and push in. I turn the pot, lift and push in. 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 So now I'm almost to the bottom. So I'm going to take my clay, fingers on the inside, thumbs on the outside, and I'm just going to go in and down. In and down. And as I do that, I'm kind of compressing the clay together like this. In and down. And compress. So I got this a little uneven. So I'm going to lift it up on this side and make it more even. Okay, so now my clay is all the way down to the bottom of the puki. And I've got all these little wrinkles around here. So I'm going to put it on my turntable because it's easier to turn the pot on a turntable than it is just on the table. You don't have to have one though. So I'm going to, again, fingers on the inside, thumbs on the outside, and working in front of me. I'm going to squeeze the clay so that I'm trying to get rid of all those wrinkles. Okay. So now I have quite a bit of clay above the edge of the puki. I want to keep maybe ½ an inch above the edge of the puki, and this is really important to have because if you go below or at exactly the rim of the puki, you have no way to attach the coil that's going to come next. So I'm going to cut this. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my forearm against my body, and I'm taking my tool and finding the lowest point, which would be about here, and then I'm turning the pot, but I'm not moving my hand. My hand is staying stable. So you should meet up with the line where you started. I didn't cut all the way through the first time because I want to make sure that I've come back to where I started. So now I'm going to go all the way through. You can see that my pin tool is all the way through. And I'm going to cut that piece of clay off. Okay, so now I have a nice, flat, straight wall. Okay, so the next step is going to be coils. So I'm going to take a little bit of clay in my hand and I'm going to squish it so it's nice and smooth, and then I'm going to start rolling it in my hand. Once I get a little bit like a cigar started, then I'm going to start rolling on this. And the canvas should be free of debris. You don't want to be picking up sticks and rocks and pieces of paper and any other thing that might be on here. So you're going to start with your fingers. You don't use your hands, you don't use the palms of your hands, you use your fingers. And you roll back and forth. And I don't get all the way to my fingertips, and I don't get all the way to my palms. I start here, and I go back and forth. And as I do that, I move my hands to either side. So I start in the middle, and I go to either side. So I'm actually letting the table and the canvas do the shaping. So you don't want to press down. If you press down into it, you're going to get little hills and valleys, and you don't want that. You want it to be nice and smooth. Now again, the thickness is dependent on the size of your pot. If you have a big thick pot, you're going to want fairly thick coils. Okay, so this is my coil. You can see that there are a few little cracks in it. That shouldn't matter. But if you get a lot of cracks, that means your clay is too dry. And if it's too dry, it's really hard to work with. It'll crumble and crack and give you all kinds of problems. So just put your hands in some water, squish it into the clay until the clay doesn't look like it's slimy on the outside anymore. Okay, so I'm right-handed. I'm going to hold the clay in my right hand. If you're left-handed, you hold the clay in your left hand. So I'm going to do it right-handed, and if you're left-handed, you can just reverse everything that I do. So I'm going to start here, right about 11 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock, if this were the face of a clock. So I lay my coil sort of toward the inside of the piece of clay. And I'm going to push down with my thumb, and I'm going to pull up with my finger. So I've got this kind of motion going on. I'm pushing with my thumb and bringing up with my finger. And I'm holding the clay coil in my hand. And as I do that, the pot is going to turn, and the coil is going to twist as it goes on. So you see, it's really important to leave some clay sticking up above the edge of the pookie. If you don't, you're going to not have anything to grab onto. So I got to where I started. And now I'm just going to lean over it, and I'm going to continue. So it doesn't matter. Your coils don't have to be the exact length. You just keep coiling until you've finished your coil. And then you're going to add another one. And the rule of thumb is that if this is 3 inches wide, the inside, the width of your pookie, the diameter of your pookie, if it's 3 inches wide, then you can build your pot 3 inches tall without having to stop. You would at that point put it aside for a little while, maybe half an hour, 15 minutes. Let it set up a little bit so that you can handle it. Otherwise, if you start going too tall, it's going to get jiggly and wobbly and start collapsing. So try to keep that rule of thumb in mind. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that your pot has to be completely inside the edge of the pookie. You don't want it overflowing over the edge. You don't want it coming out this way. So as you put your coils on, you want to bring them to the inside, and it will be getting narrower and instead of wider. If you want it to be wider later, you can do that. But while you're building, you must keep it coming either straight up or pointing in. So I'm going to move to the next step, which is to take my metal scraper and I wet it. I put my fingers straight up inside the pookie, and then I hold the pookie like this with my thumb in the middle and my fingers on the back side. You can use the pointy scraper or you can use this round scraper. And then you, with your finger, your index finger, and your other fingers, you bend it so it's round, so it conforms to the shape of the pot. So I'm going to go right down inside the edge of the pookie, and I'm going to bring the clay up. And this joins the coils together better than you did when you stuck them on there with your fingers. But the idea is to come straight up. If you start to see separations between your coils, that means that you didn't join them together well enough when you stuck them on the pot. So you can go back. If that happens, say for instance, if this is happening here, you can go down to make sure that it's all stuck together. Clay will remember, and if you don't get your coils joined together really well, they will come apart in the drying or in the firing. So that's the outside. So now I'm going to do the inside, and I'm taking the small coconut shell, and I've wet it, and it's hard to get into this tiny pot, so I'm just using a few fingers. But I've got my pinky on the edge of the pookie right against the pot, so that when I push from the inside, my hand is holding the clay in so that it doesn't spread out over the edge of the pookie. This is called the rule of the pinky on the pookie. Now, if you don't have a tiny coconut shell scraper, a spoon works just as well. And you can get in there. Sometimes it works better than the scraper because you can hold on to it from a distance and when you can't get your hand in there. So many tools that you will be using will be improvised. Don't forget that prehistoric people did not have metal scrapers. They didn't have pin tools. They didn't have sponges. They may have had natural sponges, who knows. But they made their tools, and they used what they had. They used sticks. They used probably chamois or leather hide to smooth things. They used stones. So don't be afraid of not having the right tool. Make your tool. Find a tool. Okay, so I notice on this one, I don't know if you can see it, but there are spots where the clay was not joined together well. So I'm going to go back in here and make sure that those are joined. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this. This was one that I made yesterday, so it's set up a little bit. So again, I'm going to find the lowest point, which is probably somewhere around here, and I'm going to turn the pot, not move my hand, not move my tool. So I'm not cutting with the tool, I'm allowing the clay to move so that the tool is cutting the clay as it moves. Okay, so now I'm going to go all the way through. It's a little harder when the clay is hard. You can use the line that you scribed first as a guide. So if you don't have the needle tool or the pin tool, the scraper with the pointy end works just as well to do this. Another material that they made interesting tools out of was bone. There we go. Okay, so now because this is a little bit dry, I'm going to wet it down with a sponge. So I'm going to leave this aside for a moment, and I'm going to work on my second pot by adding some more coils onto it. But I want to make sure that this surface is wet so that when I put the wet clay on there, it's not going to crack off. And then I have this little scraper that has serrated edges. So I'm going to rough up the edge, because when I add my next piece of clay, it's always better if I have a rough surface to add it to. It sticks better. The clay particles stick together like that. Okay, so this clay I'm going to wet a little bit and leave it here, and maybe we can use it later. Okay, so now I'm going to take another piece of clay and make another coil. So I start with my big thick coil, and then I start rolling it. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a design here with a tool, so that it kind of is like, remember that pot from the first video, the prehistoric pot that had some corrugated coils as a design element on the top. So I'm going to wet this again. And again, I'm going to hold my coil and push down on the inside and pull up. This clay is pretty hard, so I'm not sure that this is actually going to stick on here. But I wanted to show you how to add on to a pot. Whoops. Okay, so we've got 2 rows there. So The inside I'm not going to worry about right now. I will do that in a minute. But at this point, I'm going to take some kind of a tool. This one kind of looks like a crochet hook. Let's see what that does. That makes little round things. Okay, you could do both of them that way. You could take a different tool. This one's got a pointy edge. And let's see what that does. That makes more of a pointy triangular mark. Okay, so now I'm going to take my coconut shell scraper and I'm going to smooth out those coils on the inside. So that's the only part that will be joined together really well. The others will be joined together by the little marks that I made, indenting into the clay. So that makes a design element, which was very common in early pottery. They were trying to mimic the look of the basket impressions that were left by the baskets when they used the baskets as pookies. Okay, so I'm going to add one more coil on the top of that. So these are just going to be your two beginning pots. They don't have to be big, they can be small. One of them should have some kind of design texture on the pot. I don't think I need all this. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to add my coil just to finish it. Again, I'm just going to leave it on the outside and I'm going to scrape the inside. What did I do with my little scraper? Here it is. So as the pot gets taller, I may not be able to get my pinky on the pookie anymore, but it still should remain inside the edge of the pookie. if you're a perfectionist and you want to cut this, you can. I kind of like uneven edges. I think they give the pot a lot more character. Okay, so this pot is actually ready to take out of the pookie, but because the rim is still wet, I'm not going to work on this. This is actually ready to start scraping. And I would start by getting rid of that little extra bit of clay at the pookie line. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to let this set up a little bit before I actually start to do my scraping. Now, if there's any water that is settled down into the bottom of the pot, be sure you get that out. You don't want to leave a puddle. If you leave a puddle in the bottom of your pot, it makes the bottom much wetter than the sides, and then it dries unevenly and it tends to crack. So be sure you get your water out. Okay. I would now take this pot and cover it with plastic, as I have been doing. And by the time I get to work on it the next time, it should have set up so that it's not completely wet anymore. Make sure you cover it good, especially if you're going to be leaving it for more than a day. New Mexico is so dry that pots dry out really, really quickly. Okay, so we've got that one in process. Now this one has set up for a little while. We can keep building if we want to. Or we can decide that that's as big as we want it. And decide to cut the rim. Still pretty wet. Okay, so now I'm going to smooth off that rim. So I've got my sponge, my thumb here, my two fingers on either side of my thumb. So I'm making like a little divot that will go around the edge of my pot. So that smooths it off. So I may want to kind of flute this edge. I think that would make a nice edging on this. So I'm going to do it like I would do a pie plate. I just kind of put my index finger and my thumb and then push out with my other index finger. So I make a little fluted edge. Okay, now the same thing. I'm going to cover this up and save it, and then in our next demo I will be showing you how to scrape and then sand. Hope you had a great first week doing this. This is a lot of fun.